I do continue to sit on nonprofit boards, though. I've sat on a couple and I continue to sit on them. So I'm not completely unfamiliar with the situation that fundraisers are in. But my day-to-day experience is through the lens of population trends, demographics, behaviors, social values, and through market segmentation. I work with a range of clients in different industries to help them understand what all of these trends and patterns mean for their businesses. And many of these clients are fundraisers. I think mainstream fundraisers and marketers in general, and I would actually argue that most of you are ultimately a type of marketer. You're all faced with an environment where target populations have much greater choice in just about every way possible and are much more fragmented than in the past. This is where the exciting and daunting come in. It's exciting from the perspective of societal development. We're far more open, inclusive, and in my view, frankly, interesting society than we were 30 or 40 years ago. In Canada, we've tried to create a country in which people from every corner of the globe, of different sexual orientations and identities, and of different abilities can actively participate. There's still a lot to be done, but I think it's safe to say that we've made some strides towards becoming a more inclusive society. And the strides that we have made means that there's no longer a single way to do things. That translates into all sorts of exciting opportunities for fundraising and marketing. For LGBT fundraisers, the main target basically used to be middle-aged gay men who were primarily white and based on bi. But nowadays, philanthropy comes from communities that are multi-ethnic, multi-generational, and multi-gender, which relatively, I'd say, is actually a greater increase in diversity than mainstream fundraisers have experienced. Now that means more communities to support our collective causes, and I think that's the exciting part. But in the same breath, it's also daunting. Our progress on a number of fronts has resulted in media fragmentation, giving greater voice to smaller and smaller communities of identity. And overall, this is of course a good thing, but nonprofits are left with higher expectations from the prospective donors they have relating to the relevance in your missions and the personalizations of your fundraising asks. And of course, the resources and budgets never actually increase correspondingly with that complexity. So it's a big challenge to reach out to this fragmented market. I mean, Canada's already a small market. LGBT communities together are a small community in a small market, and when we start splitting apart our various interests and needs and identities, we're kind of small to the power of three. And small nonprofits, as we all know, struggle with viability in an environment with little government support. On Imagine Canada's website, they say that there are approximately 170,000 charities and nonprofits in Canada, and they're split pretty much 50-50, 85,000 of each type. This is where I'm going to kind of test your knowledge a little bit here. Let's talk about the top 1%. Okay, we've heard a lot about that over the last few years. The top 1%, let's talk a little bit about the 1% of income earners in Canada, so just personal income. Show of hands, what percentage does the top 1% of income earners, what is their share of total income from the entire population? How many of you think it's more than 5%? Show of hands. Okay, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. How many of you think it's more than 10%? Okay, 15, 20, 25, 30, wow, 35? Okay, so I think we're pretty much, there's a few people who still have their hands up. The actual number is 10.6%. Okay, so the top 1% take home 10 times the average. I mean, that's a pretty big number, that's a big ratio. Okay, I mean, this is the data geek in me coming out, so I get excited by this stuff. So indulge me. Now let's talk about the top 1% of nonprofits and charities. What percentage of the total revenue earned by nonprofits and charities do the top 1% of organizations account for? So let's do the same thing. 5%, hands up. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Wow, some of you know the answer. 35, pretty much most people have their hands down except you. Well, the number is 60. Okay, the top 1% of nonprofits and charities take in 60% of the revenue. So that is concentration that is far greater than the income concentration. So just my point, obviously, is that it's a very fragmented marketplace in the nonprofit world, and the number of charities has doubled in the last 30 years. So this is a big challenge. So what does all this mean? A few thoughts. Number one, more and more, I think, networks such as this one along with alliances and partnerships, are definitely going to be in the cards. You will find yourselves in what I like to call co-opetition for those philanthropy dollars, because it's just going to be difficult to go it alone with that many charities out there, and many of them being so small. I think we'll see more mainstream fundraisers teaming up with LGBT organizations in joint fundraising efforts. We saw there was one of the breakouts yesterday morning where the Canadian Cancer Society had done some outreach in the LGBT community, both from an awareness perspective as well as from a fundraising perspective. I think we're going to start to see more and more of that. I think LGBT organizations will feel a greater divide between where the need comes from and where the money is. Demographically, the most affluent LGBT communities are also the most accepted and integrated into the broader mainstream, and the day-to-day ties to the broader LGBT communities of that segment of LGBT people, I think, are weakening. I mean, look at the changes right here in the village that are going on. Sociologically, I think it's natural for this to happen as acceptance grows over time. It's a bit like new immigrants not needing to live in a cultural enclave once they become more established. But this makes donors less connected and harder to mobilize to support the causes, since they are less likely to come across those in need. How do you maintain a connection between the gay dads raising kids in Riverdale with the homeless LGBT youth on the streets of the village here? Number 3. We need much better data in this country. I mean, as a data geek, I listened in awe when LGBTQ funders from the US yesterday rattled off statistics on LGBT donations in the US and how funding fell short in the South versus the rest of the country. I mean, to my knowledge, we have basically no data in this country. You know, at Environics Analytics, where I work, we created a database a few years ago called Gayborhoods, and that estimated relative concentrations of gay males only, because we didn't have enough data for anybody else, in 4 markets only across the country. And we created a few estimates on expenditure categories. I checked, we have no information on charitable giving. Some of these basic statistics would be a good start. But I would suggest that a piece of research helping us understand the giving patterns of LGBT donors as well. You know, how do LGBT donors make decisions about where they give money and how best to influence those decisions? How important is the L, the G, the B, and the T in their decision making? For example, I give to a multitude of charities, and most of my money actually goes to non-LGBT causes. Is this because I have a preference for certain causes, certain types of causes, regardless? Is there a perception that I have that LGBT charities may not be as well managed as mainstream charities, or is there some other reason? I'm not going to tell you, but these are the kinds of questions that we need to answer. And I think, you know, LGBT organizations would really benefit from how to strategize about fundraising strategy and effective partnerships with research like that. So I hope you found yesterday's program useful. The topics had more of an emphasis on the day-to-day practice of LGBT philanthropy. Today's program is going to look at some of the bigger questions that we have, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Connie.
Well, thanks, Rupen. When I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking about my own personal story and experiences in the LGBT community, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I go back 20 years ago. Actually, I've been out for 30 years, and so I was talking about how I lost a decade there in terms of thinking back. And so yes, I've actually been out in the community and active for about 30 years, and so thinking about that in terms of how far we've come as a community in many ways. We've become far more, as we call, mainstream with same-sex marriage and the ability to adopt and so forth. And so I believe that brings us some real opportunities as well as challenges as a community. And I'd like to bring that lens to you in terms of my own experiences coming out over the last 30 years as a personal supporter of the community, as a corporate donor, as well as a board member of a number of organizations, as a fundraiser as well. When you're in business, they would say, oh, can you co-chair the annual fund campaign for us, Connie? I say, sure, why not? And also as part of setting up a startup within the community called queerbio.com. My good friend Mark Bonham and I set up we call it queerbio.com. It's basically a Wikipedia for queer people in terms of profiling gay people in the community to act as role models for people around the world. And thinking about that, we've become mainstream. And so I believe that's created some opportunities and challenges for us as a community, because I believe perhaps we're not as engaged as we could be. But I believe there's still some work to be done. in our community. We focus more on the L and the G, to be quite honest with you. The B is for the most part ignored, and the T is the starting to be explored, I believe, in our community. We're lucky that we live in downtown Toronto, where it's okay to be L and G and B and T. But when we get outside of those centers, I believe there's lots of opportunity for improvement and things that we need to do in our community. And Rupen talked about this in terms of questions around homeless youth in our country, as well as we age. There's an elderly thing that we need to think about in terms of those, what are some of the things that we need as a community as we're starting to age. And those are the kinds of things we need to think about. What's happening with our homeless youth, and as a community, as we're aging, how do we take care of ourselves so that we can still have those important lives that we want. And I'm going to challenge you. I don't believe you're fundraisers. I believe you are salespeople. And you might think that's a naughty word, but you are. You're business developers. You're building relationships. And I'm not talking about the used car salesperson. I'm talking about the person that's out there networking, building relationships, and connecting with people in a real and meaningful way that makes them to compel to act and to support the organizations they wish to support. So think of yourselves in that way. And what are you doing in order to build your networks? We've come out of the closet, and many communities have networked as a community and built relationships and collaborated for decades, if not centuries. It's our time now as a community to start to collaborate, network, and to build our relationships with people, not only LGBT people, but allies. And I believe we need to start to market and to develop relationships with our allies. We talk about the top 1%. We're not just trying to get funding from other rich LGBT people to support our organizations. Let's think about our allies as a way and a source to expand our community and to build community. So there's a couple of challenges I'd like you to think about moving forward. Rupen talked about data and analytics. There's not a lot out there, but there's some information out there. And how well are we mining that information to understand the kinds of people we should be targeting as a community and as an organization? Are you really doing that deep analysis and targeting the key organizations or people that should be supporting your organization? Are you partnering and collaborating effectively? I come from IBM, and there's some organizations that are not only our competitors, they're our clients, and they're our partners. So sometimes you need to partner with people that you may see as a competitor, but in some ways they can be someone that you can collaborate with, and in some ways could be your clients. So when you look at an individual or another organization, think of them in those perspectives. So I challenge you to think about that. And how well are you enabling technology to do what you need to do? There's a lot of technology out there. Everything, in terms of trying to raise funding and awareness for your organization. Think about the ways you can look at technology as a way to raise funds, build the awareness, and connect with communities that are not necessarily closer to you, but further away, and connecting more globally if your mandate is that. So those are the kinds of things that I think about when I think about the way forward. Partnership and collaboration, analyzing the data and the information we do have, even though it is limited, but you can still do an effective job. And how well are you effectively enabling the kind of technologies that are out there to make you more effective as a salesperson and a business development and relationship person? So those are my thoughts. And before we close, I really like to say thank you to Jay, Doug, and Stephanie for their leadership and commitment to bring our community together and expand us beyond the LGBT community and partner with organizations like the AFP. And that kind of leadership is the kind of leadership that we all need to be thinking about moving forward to make us much stronger. We've come a long way in the last 30 years. I've seen it. I remember my first Pride Day. There's 1,000 people with paper bags over their head, and there couldn't be a corporate logo to be found anywhere. Very grassroots. And today we're a proud and powerful community, and we must remember that and network like hell. So thank you for your time.